That should have been the end of the story. A miraculous encounter, a life saved, a bond formed between species. But what happened next proved that animals have memories and emotions far more complex than we ever imagined. 3 weeks after the rescue, I was conducting my regular behavioral observations when I noticed something unusual. Amara's pride was hunting differently. Instead of their typical aggressive approach, they were being more strategic, more careful. It was like they were trying to avoid injuries at all costs. Then I realized why. Word had spread through the lion community. Somehow, other lions knew about what had happened with Amara's cub. They had learned that there was a human who could help when their traditional survival methods failed. What happened next changed everything. I thought I knew about animal communication and social learning. It started with Kessie, a young male from a neighboring pride. He had been in a territorial fight and suffered a deep gash across his shoulder that was becoming infected. Instead of hiding and hoping for the best, which is typical lion behavior, Kessie did something unprecedented. He came looking for me. I was setting up camera equipment near a watering hole when I heard familiar footsteps. But these weren't the confident strides of a healthy predator. These were the careful, painful steps of an animal in distress. Kessie approached to within 20 meters and then did exactly what Amara had done. He lay down and waited. He was asking for help. A wild male lion, one of the most independent creatures on Earth, was asking a human for medical assistance. The wound was serious, but not life-threatening if treated properly. I called Marcus. Again, and once more we found ourselves in the surreal situation of providing veterinary care to a wild lion who had specifically sought us out. But Kessie's case was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, we had 7 more encounters. A lioness with a broken tooth that was preventing her from hunting effectively. An elderly male with an eye infection that was threatening his sight. A pregnant female who was having complications, and somehow knew we could help. Each time, the pattern was the same. The lion would approach, demonstrate their trust by lying down, and wait for assistance. The scientific community was skeptical when I first published my findings. The idea that lions could communicate complex information across pride boundaries, that they could learn from each other's experiences with humans, challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence. But the evidence was overwhelming. We had video documentation of every encounter. We had medical records showing successful treatments. Most importantly, we had behavioral data showing that these lions were making conscious decisions to seek human help. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the University of Cape Town came to observe our work firsthand. She's one of the world's leading experts on animal cognition, and she was initially convinced that we were anthropomorphizing natural behaviors. But after spending 3 weeks in the field with us, she witnessed something that changed her mind. Completely. We were tracking a pride that included 2 of our previous patients when we heard the distress calls. A cub had fallen into a concealed pit trap left by poachers. The pit was too deep for the adult lions to reach, and the cub was too small to climb out. Normally, this would be a death sentence. The pride would mourn and move on. But instead of giving up, the matriarch did something extraordinary. She led the entire pride directly to our research camp. 8 adult lions walked into our camp in broad daylight and began vocalizing in a pattern I had never heard before. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't territorial. It was communicative. They were trying to tell us something. Elena was filming everything, her hands shaking with excitement and disbelief. I followed the pride back to the trap site and immediately understood what they wanted. Working together, we were able to construct a ramp that allowed the cub to climb to safety. The reunion was emotional enough, but what happened next was the most remarkable display of animal intelligence I've ever witnessed. The matriarch approached each member of our rescue team individually and made physical contact. A gentle head bump for me, a soft paw touch for Marcus, and for Elena, who had been the most skeptical, the lioness actually licked her hand. Elena later described it as the moment she realized that everything she thought she knew about the cognitive limitations of wild animals was wrong. These lions weren't just learning from experience. They were developing cultural knowledge that was being passed down through generations. They were creating new behavioral patterns based on successful interactions with humans. The implications were staggering. If lions could learn to seek human medical help, what other complex behaviors were they capable of? We began documenting other changes in the local lion population. They were avoiding areas where poachers were active, even when those areas had the best hunting. They were timing their movements to coincide with ranger patrols. They were essentially using human presence as protection against human threats. But the most incredible development came 8 months after Amara's initial approach. I was reviewing footage from our remote cameras when I noticed something that made me call Elena immediately. "You need to see this," I told her. "I think we're witnessing the birth of a new form of interspecies cooperation." The footage showed Amara with her now healthy cub, but they weren't alone. There were 3 other lionesses with cubs, and they were all gathered around one of our camera stations. As I watched, Amara approached the camera and began vocalizing directly into the lens. She was followed by each of the other mothers, who did the same thing. They were creating a record. They were documenting their cubs for us. Elena arrived the next day, and we spent hours analyzing the footage. The pattern was unmistakable. These lionesses were introducing their cubs to us through the cameras. They were teaching their young that humans could be allies, not just threats. We were witnessing the evolution of a new cultural behavior in real time. The story spread beyond the scientific community when National Geographic picked up our research. The documentary, The Lions Who Ask for Help, won 3 Emmy Awards and changed public perception about animal intelligence worldwide. But for me, the real victory was much simpler. Last month, I received a call from Marcus. "Sarah, you need to get down here. Amara's back, and she's not alone." I drove to the coordinates he sent, and what I found there brought tears to my eyes. Amara was there with her now adult daughter, the cub we had saved. But the daughter had a cub of her own now, and she was teaching her baby the same behavior her mother had learned. 3 generations of lions had learned to trust humans for medical help. A behavior that started with one desperate mother's impossible decision had become part of their cultural knowledge. The granddaughter approached me with the same confidence her grandmother had shown, lay down in the same submissive posture, and waited for me to acknowledge her trust. But she wasn't asking for help this time. Her cub was healthy and strong. She was simply introducing the next generation to the humans who had become part of their extended family. As I watched 3 generations of lions interact with complete trust in human presence, I realized that we had witnessed something unprecedented in the history of human-animal relationships. We had been chosen, not as masters or caretakers, but as partners in survival. These magnificent creatures had decided that cooperation with humans was advantageous for their species' future. They had overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming that told them to fear us, and instead had chosen to trust us. The research continues today. We now have documented cases of lions seeking human help across 3 different national parks in Africa. The behavior is spreading, being taught from mother to cub, from pride to pride. We're not just studying animal behavior anymore. We're documenting the evolution of a new relationship between humans and one of our planet's most magnificent predators. And it all started with a mother's love and her impossible decision to trust the very species that had been her enemy for millennia. Sometimes the most profound scientific discoveries come not from laboratories or controlled experiments, but from moments of pure emotional connection that transcend the boundaries between species. Amara taught me that love, desperation, and hope are universal languages that every mother understands. Regardless of species, the tears in her eyes that day weren't just moisture. They were a bridge between two worlds, a connection that changed everything we thought we knew about the intelligence and emotional capacity of wild animals. And every time I see a new lion approach our camp with that same trusting posture, I'm reminded that the most important scientific discoveries often come from the heart, not the head. I thought I knew everything about lions until the day a desperate mother taught me that love has no species. What you're about to hear will completely change your view of animal intelligence, and I have the footage to prove it. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun, and for 12 years I've been studying feline behavior in Kruger National Park, South Africa. I've seen lions hunt, fight, mate, but I had never seen what I witnessed on March 23, 2024. It was 6:47 a.m. The African sun was beginning to paint the horizon golden when I heard something that made me freeze. It wasn't a hunting roar. It wasn't territorial. It was pure pain. I grabbed my camera and moved silently toward the sound. My heart was beating so loud, I was sure every animal within miles could hear it. And then I saw her, a magnificent lioness with a crescent moon-shaped scar above her left eye. I knew her. It was Amara, the matriarch of one of the groups I'd been studying for years. But something was terribly wrong. She was carrying something in her mouth. Something small. Something that wasn't moving. Listen, when you work with wildlife, you learn to prepare for death. It's part of the natural cycle. But what I was seeing, this wasn't natural. Amara started walking directly toward me. Now, let me be clear, in 12 years of fieldwork, I've never had a wild lion approach me voluntarily. They avoid humans. It's their survival instinct. But Amara, she was walking straight at me with purpose. My training kicked in. Stay calm. Don't run. Predators chase what runs. But every fiber of my being was screaming at me to get out of there. 50 meters away. 40 meters. 30 meters. With each step, I could see more clearly what she was carrying. It was a cub. Her cub. And it was barely breathing. 20 meters. 15 meters. I could see her eyes now. And what I saw there will haunt me forever. Those weren't the cold, calculating eyes of a predator. Those were the eyes of a mother in agony. 10 meters. 5 meters. And then she did something that defied everything I knew about animal behavior. She stopped right in front of me, gently placed the dying cub at my feet, and looked up at me. What I saw in that moment changed my life forever. Tears. Actual tears were streaming down her face. A wild lioness was crying and asking me for help. The cub was a female, maybe 8 weeks old. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Her little body was burning with fever. I could see infected wounds on her tiny legs, probably from a hyena attack. That went wrong. Without immediate medical intervention, she would be dead within hours. But here's the thing, I'm a behavioral researcher, not a veterinarian. I study how animals act, not how to save their lives. Yet this mother had somehow identified me as someone who could help. I looked back at Amara. She hadn't moved. She was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It was like she was reading my soul, determining whether I was worthy of her trust. And then she did something even more incredible. She lay down. A 300-pound apex predator made herself vulnerable in front of a human. She was showing me that she trusted me completely with the most precious thing in her world. My hands were shaking as I reached for my satellite phone. I called Dr. Marcus Webb, the park's head veterinarian. Marcus, I need you here now. I'm sending you my GPS coordinates. Bring everything you have for treating infected wounds in cubs. and Marcus bring tranquilizers. You're not going to believe this, but I have a lioness here who's asking for help. The silence on the other end lasted forever. Sarah, are you having heat stroke? Lions don't ask humans for help. Just trust me and get here. Fast. While we waited, something magical happened. Amara began to vocalize softly to her cub. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was almost like she was singing a lullaby. The tiny cub's ears twitched, and for a moment, her breathing seemed to stabilize. I've heard lions communicate thousands of times, but this was different. This was pure love made audible. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Finally, I heard the rumble of Marcus's jeep in the distance. As he approached, Amara's body tensed. Her maternal instincts were warring with her desperation. She wanted to protect her cub, but she also knew I was her only hope. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle slowly, his medical bag in hand. He took one look at the scene, and his jaw dropped. In 25 years of veterinary work, I have never seen anything like this. Amara watched every move as Marcus examined the cub. Her eyes tracked his hands, analyzing his intentions. When he pulled out, "Syringe for antibiotics," she growled low. But when I spoke to her softly, explaining what was happening, she relaxed. It was like she understood that this strange ritual was meant to help. The examination revealed the worst-case scenario. The cub had sepsis. The infection had spread throughout her tiny body. Without aggressive treatment, she had maybe 6 hours to live. But treating a wild lion cub isn't like treating a house cat. It required equipment we didn't have in the field. It required a sterile environment. It required taking the cub away from her mother. I looked at Amara, and somehow I knew she understood. When Marcus gently lifted the cub to take her to his mobile clinic, Amara stood up. For a terrifying moment, I thought she was going to attack. Instead, she walked over to her baby and nuzzled her one more time. Then she looked at me with those tear-filled eyes and made a sound I'll never forget. It was a sound of complete trust mixed with heartbreaking goodbye. As Marcus drove away with the cub, Amara didn't leave. She positioned herself exactly where she had placed her baby and waited. She was keeping vigil. For the next 18 hours she didn't move. She didn't hunt. She didn't drink water. She just waited for news about her child. I stayed with her. I couldn't leave. This magnificent creature had trusted me with everything, and I owed it to her to see this through. As the hours passed, I began to understand something profound about the intelligence of these animals. Amara hadn't randomly chosen me. She had been observing me for years. She knew my routine, my behavior patterns. She had somehow determined that I was different from other humans, that I cared about her kind. The sun was setting on the second day when Marcus's jeep appeared on the horizon. I could tell from his body language that he had news. Good news. He stepped out of the vehicle, carrying a small carrier, and from inside came the most beautiful sound in the world. A healthy cub's mewing. Amara's reaction was instantaneous. She stood up, her whole body vibrating with anticipation. Marcus slowly opened the carrier, and out stumbled a completely transformed cub. Her eyes were bright, her coat was glossy, and she was moving with the playful energy that only healthy baby animals possess. The reunion was something that belongs in a fairy tale, not in real life. Amara immediately began grooming her cub, checking every inch of her body, purring so loudly that I could feel the vibrations through the ground. The cub nuzzled into her mother's warmth, completely unaware of how close she had come to death. But then Amara did something that still gives me chills. She looked up at me and Marcus, and she bowed her head. A wild lioness bowed to humans in gratitude. She held that position for several seconds, making sure we understood her message. Then she picked up her healthy cub and walked away into the African sunset.